around their senses that they've been seeing along, but then afterwards realized that something wasn't right. That true knowledge that they first thought turned out to be wrong, despite what the senses were telling them. Examples? Yeah.
For instance, recently my son Mihir was not well. I put my hand up and he felt really hot. But when I actually measured him, his temperature was lower, so differences.
Very good. Excellent practical example, right? Very good. Any others about the senses still?
Sense of sight. I saw somebody and he looked exactly like one of the dads when I dropped my kids to school. And when I saw him closer, and it was a totally different person.
Okay. And at just before you realized, you were pretty convinced, right? Pretty convinced. I mean, we shouldn't bet, but if you're a betting person, you would have bet.
Yeah.
All right, good. Okay. Any more? Any more from this side? Sound. Yeah.
Like gardeners when they use those blowers
to
blow away leaves. Well, it's a very similar sound, in fact, almost exactly the sound of like a motorbike.
Yes.
And I had that experience. I thought this was at 7 o'clock in the morning. I'm thinking, what's the gardener doing? Blowing exactly a motorbike on our road.
Right.
But the sound is exactly the same.
Correct. And you can start making decisions, can't you? Call a gardener and say, why this time, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. That's another one there. Was there one more?
Taste.
Taste, yeah.
If you feel that this is really like an orange,
Yes.
it's really nice, it must sweet.
Yes.
When you taste it, it may not be like that.
Correct.
The
Very good.
sense of taste.
You know the thing we often do with children, if you put your one hand in hot water, one hand in cold water, right? 2 different buckets, then put both hands in lukewarm water, one hand will feel colder, one hand will feel warmer. Yeah? Yeah? So even, your senses, was that what you're going to say, Shadid?
Is the example we shared?
Yeah, you'd be saying, no, about tanducha, but actually your other hand is saying something else, yeah? So your senses can be wrong, yeah? Okay, example of where a thinking or logic could be wrong. Any more examples? Any examples?
We had one about superstition. Like
Yeah.
black cat person or something.
Very
And then
good.
you start thinking about it. What is it?
Yeah, so it's like magpies. You see one.
Yeah.
You see one, you see two. Like there's that saying,
Yes. So, but
or even I don't know, kagra. When they make noise, I mean, it happened and it turned out to be food.
yeah.
The other one on kind of the thinking logic is that just because the person's wearing a white coat and it's got doctor in front of their name, that what they're telling us is the right thing.
Right. So whatever they say, okay, the reason you've got a cold is A, B, and C. It's like very logical, isn't it? And you just accept it. I have a friend who's a doctor. Actually, going on to that example, and we were talking once, and I said, there must be times when someone turns up. I don't know if I should tell you. I'll tell you this anyway. And you haven't got a clue what's wrong with them, And he goes, yeah, happens all the time. And he goes, I just use my intuition, right, my logic, having sensed so many, I just said, go into ABC. He goes, I have no idea it's going to work. They generally don't turn up again, right? That's what's wrong. And that person, yes, very good. So that person, right, the person hearing it sees everything structured and logically broken. Maybe there is no logic to it. Okay, and there are other examples we have, right? As you said, superstition, but you can say, my parents are not here, but I'll say this example. When we're in India, someone says, seatbelt around, nothing ever goes wrong here. Right now, do you see? Because it hasn't gone wrong for them. But if you step back and think, you're not in control when you're in the car. Someone else can come and crash into you. Okay, I mean, we know that, right? So that logic is wrong, really. It's not in your control whether you're a seatbelt or not. What actually happens? Okay.
There's another example. Writing wills. People refuse to write wills because the moment you write wills, they think they're going to die.
Exactly. Brilliant.
Don't do it.
Okay. Yeah.
This is like a personal, it just made me think when an example where our thinking can be wrong, because we're just so like nowadays with all this terrorism and Muslims and things like that. I mean, this is like I'm wrong in thinking this, but it just is so instinctive that there's no even logic in thinking what you're thinking before you've thought about it. It's like already the thought has occurred. Sorry, I'm a bit.
Correct.
I don't know. I'm like if I'm making sense. But
Yes.
an example from my work is like the moment you see Middle Eastern lady or something, my first instinct is, oh, do you speak English? And they open their mouth and they're fluent in English, and then it's just like completely, you're just so like biased in thinking what you are.
There you
But then
go.
it makes me
Yeah.
think, I don't know why I say that every time.
Yeah.
Or like another thing is, for a long time I used to look at all these Indian patients, and I would automatically think, oh, I to smoke no kare. And the moment I say, oh, do you smoke? Oh, yeah, 20 per day. For how long? 40 years. And I'm like, okay. So it kind of like you're automatically pigeonholing people,
Correct.
and then your thinking is like completely so out
Correct.
in what you
So
saw.
the other thing that can happen is that not only do you do that, okay, so if you're superstitious about magpies, right, yeah, you believe that, and then because you're so superstitious, you'll only listen out to people who are got the same superstition. So what you have is you have this bias where all you're hearing is the same thing from outside the world. Can you see that? So then you're locked into just hearing that from others as well. So it feeds into that logic more and more and more. Okay. But that's so there is so just to understand both of those senses or mind can be wrong. Okay. Okay. So just to finish off, we've got 5 minutes. So it's really, really interesting, right? If I go back to this, this is fascinating. I've learned so much in reading this. Where's it gone? It says worldly knowledge is produced by the senses and the mind. You know, so Tattvartha Sutra is giving equal strength to the mind and the senses. Equal strength. Saying actually we need to combine both, right? We need to go and test our knowledge, but we also need to use our thinking as well.
But that means it's like a foolproof, isn't it? If you don't apply both, there is no. It's not like a bulletproof jacket. You know,
Yeah.
you can hit and miss in either way. But you need to always have both of them. That's why you.
Yeah.
That's what you call experience, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, that's just that's one way of looking at it. What this is saying is that real knowledge, right, is coming from a combination of two things. It actually the two things are being combined to get that real knowledge. Okay. So, what, for example,
If it's
Cause and
combined, it
effect.
can't be wrong.
sorry?
If it's a combined knowledge,
Yes.
it can't be wrong.
Yes, what it's saying is that we should rely on both things, right, and try and work together with them to get a better knowledge of Matijnana, which is still wrong knowledge because the real knowledge is outside. Remember that? In terms of our daily world, we should combine. We should look to both. So let me give you a quote. So this is. I think there's debate on when this book was written, 1st, 2nd, or 3rd century. There's a big debate, but it was written a long time ago, right? But this is really, really interesting. So this guy, Immanuel Kant, another philosopher. So the big debates, right, all up till then, were between these two in Western philosophy, right? So all the Greek philosophers, right, would say everything comes from the mind. Everything that you sense, ignore it. Everything comes from mind. Just spend your time thinking. Don't spend your time sensing. Spend your time thinking. That's where Greek philosophy comes from. And British empiricism, okay, which is one of the reasons why we're here actually, funnily enough, all came from, okay, the mind is just a vehicle. First use your senses, and then use the mind to understand what you've learned from your senses. Okay, so all the inventing of steam, computers, the railways, all of these things come from this empirical idea of let's go and use our senses, understand nature, right? Understand nature really well, understand how it works, use our logic to then put it into buckets and structures so we can make it good use for it. So all the modern things come from understanding nature, right? How pressure works, how gases work, how chemistry, physics. That is actually called natural philosophy. So science actually came from philosophy, right? Science came from this kind of philosophy, which is let's use our senses. Everyone with me so far? Okay, and that's why all the Brits came to India, they came to Kenya, and that's how we turned up here. Okay, right? So interesting. So anyway, I'll finish off on that, and we're done then. So this is what Immanuel Kant said. He said, thoughts without contents are empty. Intuitions without concepts are blind. Understanding can intuit nothing. The senses can think nothing. Only through the unison can knowledge arise. Everyone understand that? And I think this is what this is saying. Okay, it just hasn't been written down in the way Kant wrote it, right? But that's what Tad Indriya, Anindriya, Animitam is saying. It's a combination of both. So, okay, so we're done. I'm just going to go through what we've done today. I'm just going to go through the phrases and then we are finished. Any questions before I do that?
Just have one that, out of all this 5 knowledge, does that mean you need to have the Mati knowledge, the Mati sense?
We're born with it. We have it.
We have it, yes,
To an
but it's
extent.
only humans have it.
Yes.
If you look at plants or the other less Indriya jeeves, do they have the same Matijnana as we have? So why is that it's only you have to be a human to actually achieve the last, the Keval Gnan?
Because those, go on, Rajiv, do you want to say? It's the innate knowledge.
I mean, animals, plants do have, because essentially what Ketan is saying, that there is senses, and we know there are 5 types of senses. So we are born with 5 senses. So if a plant has got 1 sense, that's still a sense. So that still comes under Mati, because you're using a sense knowledge. The plants, when if there's sunlight outside and the plant bends towards the sunlight, it's using a sense that there is light out there and it's bending towards the sunlight.
But they're missing the mind, isn't it?
So they're missing the mind, yes.
Yes. So I'm saying the Mati is a combination of mind and sense. Is that right?
Yeah.
No, it's saying it's both, right? It's both. For animals, plants have it because they have 1 type of it. There's 6 types. 5 senses and the mind. Okay? But what this is saying is that it can be produced by both. But what I was trying to say is that for humans, it's a combination which is the special bit.
And which only humans have.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So
And I would say animals.
Humans have to a very high level, because there are some animals which also have got a mind. So some animals,
We know that.
but humans have evolved that into much better understanding of the distinction between right and wrong and all that. So many animals, because some animals have mind.
Next week we're going to talk about how you have strong Matijnana. What are the flavors of that, which we're going to talk about next time. Shelley.
Yeah, no, the bit I was just going to add is the bit that Reggie Fight just mentioned about the difference between right and wrong. So what humans have, which makes them different from animals, and what humans have, which allows them to go towards Samyak Darshan and Moksha, is Vivek Buddhi, the ability to discriminate between what's right and what's wrong. And that is one of the important aspects there to cultivate on the path. So this concept of Vivek Buddhi.
So we're done for next week. I just want to ask you one example. Let's just share some experiences. Who wants to? Only please volunteer. I'm not going to force anyone. Who wants to just share the experience of something that they have good grounding and how they acquire that knowledge? Anyone, please.
I talk about her, her name is Jigna, and she is very initiative and careful about protecting living things and living beings.
Okay.
Yeah, she said when she was small, if anybody had seen an insect or anything, or crushing it or even destroying it, she would try and save it or think about it. Even for plants, she's very initiative. The plant was going very big and somebody wanted to take it out, but she said, no, I must keep this plant, I've been taking care of it.
So how did that knowledge come, Chigame? By just observing, and when you saw that, you felt something, did you? When you
I
saw
think it's from childhood I was like that.
Okay.
And then gradually as you're growing up, and I was growing up in India, and your parents say that, oh, Atma hoy. And you think, at that time you don't know what Atma is, and you're just listening, but then maybe it's
like an inborn.
But was it something that you just thought about? You thought, hang on a minute, we should protect
no,
insects?
you just don't feel right.
You didn't feel right.
So when
Okay.
somebody's killing an ant in a school map, when you go to school, in a school Jain, in a children just stamp on it, and you think, oh, don't do that.
Good, good.
So
So you didn't experience lots and lots of ants being killed, and then you thought this is wrong, which would be lots of study, and then you actually felt deep down straight away something's not right. Yeah, comes from your something inside, some thinking inside. Yeah. Okay, good. Another example? Examples of knowledge? There's no right or wrong answer. It's just to understand.
We're thinking of driving.
Okay, tell us, how did you learn?
Like basically, yeah, the need basis. So driving is an essential skill to learn. And then you learned the theory. Then you learned you took the driving test, failed a
Yes.
few times, and then you got your license. But then that doesn't mean that you know driving at that point. Over years, then you hone your skills and you learn instinctively what's right and what's wrong, and maybe that's how
Okay,
you
so a lot of the
learn.
learning of driving is just practicing, isn't it? Comes from the senses, right?
Yeah.
Just practicing and seeing, getting it wrong. And then sometimes that practice, if you get it wrong, you may go back into the book or logic and say, oh, actually, is it 60 miles an hour on a in a country lane, or is it 30? You might go and check, right? But a lot of it is coming from the senses. Is that right? Okay, good. Any more?
Same as cycling.
Cycling, same thing, right? You don't start cycling from thinking about cycling, reading a book on cycling, do you? You generally start by falling down straight away, right? Then it starts all from your senses, right? From feeling and touching. Any more examples? Anyone got a combination?
I would say, I was just talking about the cooking, and I said I'm not a very good cook, or I wasn't keen on cooking. But I think it's just looking at using the senses and using the intuition, what will work and how it goes. And when you see the ingredients and you just look at it and say, okay, it's going to work.
Yeah.
So bit of both.
Yeah.
Knowledge from senses and intuition.
Yeah, so sometimes you just see and then you go to the cookbook, then you combine the two. But some people, they say, they never read a cookbook, right? They just know what to do, right? If you ask them to write it all down, they'll go, this is too complicated. I can do it, but don't ask me to break it all down, because I just know what to do. Yeah, so it's all coming from here. Does that make sense?
It could be a combination if you're learning a new recipe.
Yes, it could be.
And you learn from.
You might do the thinking first, okay, but you probably have applied some senses from past experience, right? You've taken your senses and then done the thinking. Does that make sense? Yeah, everyone okay with that? Okay, so what I want you to do, just out of just trying to understand. So I'm going to put this up in a second, and I want you to come up so I get everyone's answer, and I want you to think about your knowledge, that example that you had. Okay, where did it come from? Okay, if it came purely from the mind, like if you thought about infinity, whether it exists or not, and you think it does exist, there's nothing in your senses that shows you infinity. Can you see that? You'll be here, right? And if it's cycling, or you've never read a book, it probably is here, right? If it's a combination, it's probably here. Does that make sense? Right? And it's more of this and then into that, and it's more down this side, okay? So what I want you to do is come up, I'll give you a pen, and just put a mark. That's it. Just put a mark on where you think that bit of knowledge was. Does that make sense? Okay, please come. Just put a mark and pass the pen, and then sit back down. Any questions? Come and ask me. Just everyone up. Come, quick. Everyone up. Yeah, more pens. Everyone up. Just put a mark. Just put a mark past the pen. Okay, just on the one topic you had. Just on the one topic you had. Not on every whole knowledge, just on the one topic. Thank you. Okay, once we're done with the pens, yeah, thank you. Thank you. Okay, good. So really good, really nice spread. And I'll take it that everyone thinks that knowledge can come from everywhere, right? Is what I'm saying here. Yeah, it can come from the mind, it can come from the senses, or it can be a combination. Okay, so that's really good. I'll sit there.
So one question.
Yeah.
When does actually the desire to get the knowledge or do something, that actual first spark?
Okay, good. We're going to come on to that. We're going to come on to that. Okay, good. So yeah, if you can hold that a question for a bit. So we're going to go on to the 1.9. Okay, so basically, Tattvartha Sutra, right, which we're going to come on in a minute, says there's this thing about mind and senses, okay, is one type of knowledge, and it encompasses all of it. There's something called Matijnana. All of it into one, okay? So this is the first verse of 1.9. It says, Mati Sutta Avadi Manaparyaya Kevalani Nanam. Okay, that's 1.9. And it says Mati. So it says the variety of knowledge are 5 types. The first one is Matijnana, okay, which is what we've just been talking about, mind and senses, right? Got it? Something we can relate to directly via thinking or in our senses. That's called Matijnana. We will just practice that in terms of the discussion. The second one is Shruta, which is scriptural knowledge, which Rajiv is going to talk about. Rajiv is going to talk about the rest of these 4 things. I said he had all the interesting parts, which is scriptural knowledge. And this, so it's not reading knowledge. Okay, it's not reading a novel or whatever. It's actual scriptural knowledge we're talking about, which is based on what our Tirthankars have passed down and then has been written down. And the other thing is that with scriptural knowledge, it can also relate to, tells us about how things were in the past and how karma and the soul and how the world is going to act now and in the future. The third one is called Avdignan, which is clairvoyance in English, which means basically being able to see something outside of your normal perception. Okay, being able to see an object, a person, or a location outside of your normal perception. So you might be able to say, actually, in Madhyama 1, right now, there is a blackboard, and on the blackboard, this is written down. Okay? Or being able to sense that this person is located here or is there. Okay? The fourth one is Manaparyaya, which is mind reading. So this is very powerful, and I'm going to let Rajiv come on to that when to discuss it in more detail. But basically, you can actually see what the other person is thinking. Actually see what the other person is thinking. Actually know that this is what's happening in their mind right now. Very powerful. Yeah. And the last one is Keval Gnan, right? Which is the omniscient knowledge, which is the real reality of past, present, and future. Okay, and that is the ultimate knowledge. Okay, I'm going to stop there for 1 minute. Just bear in mind that these 4, Rajiv is going to cover in more detail. So don't ask me too many questions, because then you'll spoil. Well, you won't spoil it, but it will be too early, right, for Rajiv. But we're going to focus on this bit. Is that okay with everyone? Everyone okay so far? Everyone with me so far? Okay. So if you are going to go to sleep, right, after you learn this is the most important bit. Okay. So you wanted to fall asleep, now is your chance. Okay, but hopefully I'll keep it interesting. Everyone okay so far? Okay, good. Right. Okay, and then I'm going to just do 3 more where they divide this knowledge into 2 classes. Okay, so first one is Tat Pramane, and basically what they're saying is that these 5 types of knowledge are divided into 2 classes. Acquired, so the mind and senses is acquired, scriptural knowledge is acquired, and the other one that's innate. Okay, and we're going to talk, I'm going to come on to your point in a minute, but we're going to talk about what does innate mean. Because acquired does mean acquired, so innate means that you can never acquire it, right? There's no point trying to get it, because you'll never get it. You either have it or you don't have it. So we're going to talk about that a little bit in a second. The second verse is Adhya Paroksham, which basically means that the first 2 types of knowledge, empirical and articulate, are acquired. And the 1.12 is Pratyaksham Anyat, which means the next 3 varieties are innate. Okay, so you can see this is actually, we can just take the whole lot and say the 5 types of knowledge divided into 2 types. The first 2 are acquired and the others are innate. Everyone with me so far? Okay? And we know that what we just did, the knowledge we do every day, is all acquired, isn't it? Either we think about it, or we see it, or we feel it, or we touch it. Okay? So mind reading, clairvoyance, and omniscient knowledge is not something you can crave for and get. It happens when you have certain circumstances.
Like gifted.
Yes. Yeah, if you want that analogy, yes, like gifted.
But that defeats the purpose of working towards Keval Jnana.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about that a little bit later on. Okay, but it's up for debate. But they are innate in the sense that you can't use your mind and your senses to acquire them.
So excuse me, one more question. Yeah, if a mother feels for a child, something's going to happen to him.
Yeah.
Will it come in innate?
Yeah, you could say yes. So it's not saying you can't have innate knowledge, but yeah, it's just saying that it's not acquired. They just have it. They don't go and learn.
It's like a sixth sense.
It's like a sixth sense, exactly. But it's not something you go and learn, right? You just have it.
Not only sixth sense, it's also like breathing.
Okay.
Breathing is innate. Or a bird learning, when a bird is born and it flies, or a fish swims, it's innate knowledge. No one has taught.
Yeah.
No one has taught a bird to fly.
Yes.
A lot of people have intuition about various things, so that would fall into that category as well.
Up for debate as well. Okay, I'll tell you why. Because we'll talk about that again in 1 minute. But intuition can also be because you have sensed so many things that you haven't recognized consciously, only recognized unconsciously, and then you piece those things together in your mind, and you call that intuition. If you see what I'm saying, right? So, for example, if you are driving a lot and you see so many cars, okay, and you are in another country and suddenly there's a car and you automatically know that's a Toyota Corolla, right, in the dark, then how do I know? It's because you have seen those shapes so many times. Does that make sense? But yeah, so this word intuition is problematic a little bit. The kind of intuition Rajiv is saying, which we're going to come on to, is something that is absolutely innate. It's there whether you have any experience or not. It's nothing to do with experience. Make sense?
Is it anything to do with the knowledge in that case?
Sorry?
Is it anything to do with the knowledge in that case?
Which
it just happens like a bird when it's born, it's able to fly.
Yeah.
It is inherent quality or ability to fly. So we call that type of knowledge.
Yeah, it's born with that innate. It's not only innate knowledge, but it's born with a knowledge that gives it that ability to fly, right? And where that knowledge comes from is a question mark. Scientists will say it's in your DNA, and therefore the DNA just tells the senses do this, do this, do this. It just tells the senses go and do these things, and it just happens because it's in the DNA.
As far as we are concerned, we would not definitely class it in the last three.
No,
so
I wouldn't.
Would you class it in is a superior type of Matijnana, or how would you?
I would say okay. We're going to come on to this, but I would say, let me just go back to this slide. I would say that this all comes from this kind of thinking, that it's you're born with it. You're born with logic. For example, you are born with an appreciation of space. Space you don't learn. You're born with appreciation of space, 3D space. It's not something you learn. Okay, and philosophers would call this rationalism. It comes from thinking, or it comes from this thing that's already inside, right? Your intuition, as Parag would say, right? Okay, Jains are going to say that the innate knowledge is something a little bit different from that. Everyone with me so far? Okay, good questions. Any more questions? Okay. Right, I'm now going to. So we saw this now. This you don't have to remember, but just in case it's useful just to know that there's this table in this book which just breaks it down into the innate and the acquired. And the acquired, which is the empirical, which is what we just about non-linguistic and quasi-linguistic. And in this quasi-linguistic, there is all the things about sense and memory and so on. And in articulate, it's broken down, and in innate, it's broken down into those three things, okay? But it's broken down into more and more structures, which I'll come on to. But there's like a tree of knowledge, okay? If you wanted to do that. But don't remember this, just to let you know that exists. Okay, so let's go on to this very good story about Plato's cave, which I think will bring out some of these things, things we've just been talking about, okay? Something by, remember I gave this analogy of the frog seeing light for the first time and so on? Now, we don't know where this analogy comes from, but obviously it might have been passed down and so on. But the good thing is we have some evidence of something that was written by Plato in 380 BC. Okay, so about 200 years after Mahabharata. Okay, and he wrote this book called The Republic. Okay, everyone know Plato, right? Greek philosopher. It's a really, really interesting story. And trying to touch upon what this difference is between innate and acquired. Okay. So basically, now if you read Jain books, a lot of Jain books are written in terms of stories and metaphors. You know, we use lots of stories and metaphors. We always got, you know, bright as the sun, cool as the moon. You know, we all use these metaphors, right? In the Greek philosophy, they have storytelling. They have, I was telling him that, and then he told me this, and then he said that, and then that happened. It's like a story, it's like a dialogue, you know, like a chat. That's how they write it down. So in this story, Plato and Socrates are having a chat. And Plato says, okay, look, let me give you a nice story, you know. So he says, okay, imagine that there's a cave. There's a cave. Who's heard this story before, by the way? Anyone? Rajiv? No, you've heard this. Okay. Imagine this cave, there's all these people. Okay? And there's a wall here. Can you see? You can't see the wall, but there's a wall here. Can you see that? They're all chained to this wall. And they see just what's on this wall. Okay? So just imagine you seeing this wall, all chained up. You can't move, you can't turn back. And behind them is this fire. Okay? Everyone okay so far? And in between is this roadway. And on the roadway are people walking. And on them they're carrying, you know, plates of fruit and things, materials and wood and so on. Everyone okay with that so far? And this fire casts a shadow on the wall. Can you see it behind you? All those people walking, there's a fire. You see all these shadows on the wall. Everyone okay so far? You're in chains, okay? The chain thing is a really good metaphor, okay? And so basically, you're there, and every day with your friends, you somehow water and stuff comes to you, and every day you get food and water, and every day you discuss the shadows with your friends. You say, hey, look at that shadow. I recognize that shadow. It kind of looks like that, half a circle, and a bit of rectangle. Isn't that interesting? I saw that yesterday at 3 o'clock. Did you see the shadow? And you start talking about the shadows, right? That's your reality. Can you see that? That is your reality. You talk about the shadows, you start understanding the shadows really well. You start noticing shadow type 1, shadow type 2, and you start giving them names. Let's call that shadow something, let's call that shadow something. Does that make sense? Yeah? So there you are. And then one day, what happens is suddenly one of the prisoners, so Plato says, imagine one of these prisoners gets set free. Turns around, blinded by the fire. Never seen such a bright fire, because remember the fire is behind them. Suddenly, you know, they get very shocked, and everything's now, the shadows, when they look back, because of the bright light, the shadows don't look very clear anymore. Make sense? Yeah, if I just put this light on very brightly, suddenly the screen wouldn't look very great, would it? Make sense? Yeah? And this person says, okay, gets actually a bit worried and says, actually, what I've been seeing all this time, seeing all these shadows, they're not very clear anymore. I think I'll go back. I'll go back and sit down. This is a bit freaky, this is bright light. Someone grabs a person. Someone grabs a person and takes them outside the cave. And outside the cave, suddenly they start seeing what the reality is really like. They start seeing the human beings, they start seeing animals, they start seeing what they're carrying and so on. And then after a little while, they start, actually, the eyes get adjusted and they can now see the sun. And they can see the moon and the stars because now they're adjusted. Okay? This person says, aha, this is the real reality. I'll have to go back down the cave and tell all my friends. What you guys are seeing are just shadows. That's not real. That's not real. No, this is the reality. So this person goes back down. So this is all Plato's story, you know. So this is like a story he does. He goes back down. He says, "Oh look, Socrates, you know, this person goes back down, and you know what happens next? He goes back down. As soon as he goes in the cave, everything's completely dark for him because suddenly he's come from the very bright light into this dark. He doesn't see any shadows. He doesn't see any shadows. It's just too dark for him. And all these friends said to him, "Where have you been? Where have you been?" He goes, "Well, I went out there. You won't believe what's out there. You know what you got here is this is not reality." And they say, "Really?" And they say, "What's the matter with your eyes? You know, can you not see properly?" He goes, "No, I can't see any shadows anymore." He goes, "There's something seriously wrong with you. Why did you go outside? Right? Please sit back down. Right? And you know, please adjust to this. You've gone crazy. You've gone nuts." And then they have a discussion. They say, "If anyone tries and grabs us and takes us outside, stop that person. Don't, because they're coming back and they're coming back blind. So don't go outside." Okay? So that's Plato's story. And I don't know if you can see the metaphors, right? But the metaphors are that real world, right? The real world is, you know, the world we're in is shadows, and the real world is really out there. Okay? And it's nothing to do with our mind and our senses. Okay? I mean, it's very hard to explain in words, but you can see Plato was struggling, so he had to put the story together. Okay? What he's saying is that the innate world, the innate thing that Jainism talks about as well, is something that is beyond our mind and senses. Okay? And that's exactly what he's saying. He's saying the same thing, which is pretty incredible, really. You know, just 200 years after Mother. Everyone okay so far with that? Any questions? So I don't know if I don't know how far this goes.
Yeah.
Answering question.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what he would say is, you know, तुम्हारा example क्या था? The question you asked about.
I mean, it was just that initial thought are to do something. You know, the initial thought to, you know,
Correct.
to learn or whatever. Then things roll on, obviously. Then you acquire knowledge this way or that way, whatever means you do.
Yes, but you know, like flying chair, right? You know what flying, or let's say understanding of space, understanding of cause and effect. Like infinity. When I say to you infinity, something goes on forever and ever and ever. Anyone get worried by that too much? We can kind of see that, right? We can't understand it. Yeah, can we? It doesn't. We don't wake up at night thinking there can't be infinity. We're kind of comfortable with it, right?
Because you come to accept it.
But there is no infinity. Have you seen
You don't
infinity?
understand it, so you just accept it.
But have you seen infinity?
Nobody has.
Okay. So what he's saying, what Plato's saying is that those shadows, right, that we see. So we do see the shadows of the real world in some way, that real innate world in some way. And infinity is in that shadow. So we kind of see a bit of it, and then we kind of accept it. Because it doesn't bother us too much. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because we accept it.
Yeah.
Like a blind person, he cannot see anything, yeah. But he has the senses and makes use of it in another way.
Correct. And he becomes accustomed to it, right? And maybe they don't know how it comes, but they become accustomed to it. So actually, that real world out there, we do see shadows of it. Okay? But it's whether we tune into those shadows or not, really. Obviously, the ideal thing is to go out the cave, but we do see shadows of that world. Any other thoughts?
I mean, you know, infinity-wise, it really doesn't make any difference to you day to day. So
No, but there's nothing. Tell me something in your senses that you've seen that tells you there's infinity. What have you seen in your senses? Give me any world experience where there is something limitless. You know, if someone tells you infinity, then you can think about it.
exactly.
But where's the experience? You know, that tells you that it exists. But we all and also cause and effect, which is another philosophical problem. But I won't go into it. But what cause and effect? What a lot of philosophers now say, we are born with cause and effect. We understand what cause and effect is. It's not something we learn. We're just born with it. Okay, so it comes from somewhere, Okay, and what Plato says, it comes, these are shadows of that reality. Okay, so just so that to kind of maybe we've got 15 minutes, so just what Tattvartha Sutra says is, it says 1.14 tad indriya anindriya animitam, right? And what that's saying is that the mind and the senses, now we're going back to the real world, come together to give us knowledge. Okay, so that's what it's saying. It's saying the mind and senses both work together. Okay, it's not saying that they always work together, but they're both important, right? You can't just be you can't just consider your mind only important. It is important in certain things. You can't consider your senses only important. They come together. Okay, so let's just do a quick exercise. Okay, so another exercise we're going to do now. So I want you to stay with the same partner, and let's do an example of where something that you've sensed actually turned out to be wrong. The real knowledge turned out, you sensed something, but the real knowledge afterwards turned out to be wrong. So now we're going back to this Matijnana knowledge now, right? Forget the Plato stuff now. We're just going back to this. So you sensed something, you saw something, but it turned out to be wrong. Okay? Shall I give an example of that very quickly? Okay? So a very good philosophical problem is the problem of black swans. Okay? So the problem of black swans is that every day I live in a village, and every day I wake up and I see white swans. Right? That's in my village. There are white swans, and I go everywhere. There's a white swan. There's a white swan. There's a white swan. There's a white swan. And my whole life I see white swans, and I write down a theory. All swans are white. That's what's wrong with that theory. It's perfectly valid, isn't it? Okay. But it only takes one instance of a black swan to see one, and that theory is destroyed. Make sense? Okay? So often we sense something many times, but actually our sense could be wrong. Make sense? The other thing is that there might be something that in logic, that we think about, but actually that logic is flawed, right? We might add up some numbers, and actually the way we add up numbers is wrong. So there might be something in our thinking that's actually flawed. And you think, I always thought that, I always thought this. But actually then, when you go into the experiments, you find out that actually that's not true anymore. Everyone okay with that? Okay, so a good example of that is that Newton, right, worked out by thinking and by logic that gravity exists, right, and things attract each other, right? Yeah, but we know when you get down to very small particles, right, gravity doesn't kind of breaks down. We know that now, okay? But he worked out from logic that gravity exists, and it does. But in some cases, our senses tell us experiments tell us that doesn't work. Okay? So get back with your partner. Just don't worry about all these complicated things like gravity. So just your normal experience. An example when your senses were wrong, okay, and an example when your thinking, turned out to be wrong. Could be a very day-to-day example. Okay. I'll give you 5 minutes. Same partners. On after Shandip Bhai. Well, Vinod Bhai was first. Shandip Bhai, and I'm going to do a few more chapters of the Tattvartha Sutra. So it's been a week since we met, so you might have forgotten a few things. So just to remind you where we are on this. So chapter 1, which is what Shandip Bhai did, which was from 1.1 to 1.7. He talked about the three essentials for liberation. So right faith, right knowledge, right conduct. Everyone remember that? Yeah? And then what he talked about was that in terms of faith, all the qualities required to have the right faith, and what the qualities we would observe if someone had the right faith. So the rest of chapter 1, this is 1.8 to 1.35, which is what myself and Rajiv are going to cover. I'm going to talk about 1.8 to 1.20, which is about the 5 types of knowledge, right? So Samyak Jnana, the 5 types of knowledge, we're going to talk about what those are, and also we're going to talk very specifically about one kind of knowledge called Matijnana, okay, which I'll explain what that is, which is all about mind and senses. And then Rajiv Bhai will come after me in 2 or 3 weeks, and he will talk about the other 4 types of knowledge, probably the more important types of knowledge, if I'm honest. So I'm doing the boring bit, he's going to do the really interesting bit. Okay. Is everyone okay where we are? Okay, and so that's chapter 1, okay? So what are the aims, of what I want to do? So we're going to talk about 1.9 to 1.20, which is all about mind and senses. Okay, about our mind and senses, which is an essential part of how we pick up knowledge. Everyone agree with that? Okay, and we're also going to talk, as I'm sure you've seen the stuff I do before, it's going to be very interactive, I'm afraid. There's not much sitting down or just listening to me, it'll be quite interactive. We're also going to compare this to other philosophies, particularly Plato, okay? He's a philosopher which I'm sure you've heard of, Greek philosopher. We're going to talk a little bit about him. Okay, just a warning. We are going to do lots of exercises, so it's not just a presentation. I really want you to think for yourself. Your experience, your ration, what you come up with in this world is really, really important. So I want you to bring that in here. Okay? I'm not going to do the talking. We're all going to work together and try and find out what do we all know as a group. And don't worry about appearing good to anyone. Just say exactly what your experience is or what you think. I think that's the best way to learn. Don't worry about whether even there may be something in the scripture you disagree with. That's okay. But let's just talk about where you are in relation to the scripture. Is that okay? That's really important. Okay. So in terms of this is just, so this is, anyone seen this book? Right? So this is Tattvartha Sutra. This came out in the 90s by Matijnana. Okay, so this is one translation of Tattvartha Sutra, which we're all very familiar with because it came out here, the big ceremony and so on. But there, as I found out from Vinod Bhai, there are another 2. So there's one by Manu Doshi and one by K.K. Dixit. Okay, so I referenced all 3 of them. And in talking to Vinod Bhai, surprise, surprise, there are actually some differences. Okay, but mainly I'm going to use this as a reference. Okay, it's the nature of life that even the different versions have some differences, but we'll try and stick to one version as much as we can. Okay, so Samyak Gnan, which is right knowledge. I think this has already been covered, but Samyak means right, and Jnana means knowledge, right? Okay, everyone okay with that? Okay, good. Right, so we're going to start with an exercise straight away, okay? So what I want you to think about is some knowledge you have, right, which you are very sure about. Very, very sure about. You know that knowledge, okay? And it doesn't have to be something big, it's something very, very small. For example, knowledge of walking, okay? We all have very, very sound knowledge of walking, am I right? Yeah? Of course, if you're born disabled, maybe not, but I think all of us here have very sound knowledge of walking. Okay? But it could be other types of knowledge. So I just want you to think of one type of knowledge that you have, that you're very sure about, very, very sure about. And ask yourself this question, how did that knowledge come? Where did that knowledge come from? And I'm not looking for scriptural knowledge. It could be any knowledge, right? Any knowledge at all. Did it come from thinking? Did it come from study? Or did it come from your sense experience? Everyone with me so far? Okay? Just to help you, I'll give you some examples, okay? So, these are made up, okay? I'm a qualified doctor, have good knowledge of dermatology, which is about skin, okay? My knowledge started when I was studying and thinking of the subject. And I just thought, hang on, I really am interested in knowing about skin. And I was just thinking and thinking. And then I started using my senses and looked at plenty of case studies and my experience of patients. And that's how I've become a very good dermatologist. So first I started thinking, then I started using my senses. Everyone okay with that example? The other example is, I've always been good at sports, okay? Somehow I can find a way to play new sports very quickly, can work out all the angles by intuition. I don't read any book on sports, I just am good at sports. Yeah, are people like that? Right, does Sachin Tendulkar, did he read books on cricket? I doubt it very much. Right, it was just his pure experience, am I right? Yeah? No one's ever learned to swim reading a book on swimming, am I right? Yeah.
They will be coached by
the instructor.
Sure, but how would they learn? Okay, so that's fine. If that's how you learn, then think, how did that come about? Is it by thinking about what the instructors say, or by using the senses? Okay, so these are just examples. You have your own personal examples. Another one, my dal is something people highly rate. I learned it to cook from my grandmother. Okay, just watching my grandmother all the time. Okay, another one. It occurred to me many, many years ago, there must be life in the universe. I was just thinking, my reasoning was, why should we be alone? You know, there's no reason why we should be alone on this planet Earth. There must be life on other planets. Just by using logic, and just by working out, you know, that there must be. Strangely, science has caught up with me now. We found loads of planets in lots of suns, right? So my thinking has now become right. Does that make sense? Okay, so there you have the mind and then the sense came. So does that make sense? So I'm just going to give you 1 minute on your own. Just close your eyes if you can, and just think of one thing that you're very sure about, and just think about, how did you learn that knowledge? Did it come from mind or senses, or was it a combination? Okay, just 1 minute, quiet time. Okay, whenever you're ready, start opening your eyes. Okay, so what I want you to do now, okay, is in a minute I want you to pair up with someone. They're going to be born in the same month of the year that you were born in. Shelin, when's your birthday? What month? September. Anyone born in September? Brilliant, right? So Shelin can look around and try to find with someone. Ideally, it's a small class today, you shouldn't have met them before. So ideally find someone that you don't know very well. You might have met them, but you don't know them very well, okay? And all I want you to do is find that person, sit next to them, and talk about this, share this experience, all right? How did you get this knowledge, okay? Off you go. So you'll have to first find out. You'll have to all get up, please, all stand up. You'll have to go and ask people what month they were born.
Anybody born in July? December? July?
August?
Anyone born in July?
You can have a group of 3, okay? There's no group of 2. You can have a group of 3. Yeah, you're going to find someone else. That's fine. There must be someone born in July, but find someone else. Chalo? If you can't find someone, then find anyone.
Yeah, that's okay. But reading major part is experimenting and picking. Start with something. Main point
I'm sure not.
Okay, 3 more minutes. 3 more minutes.